Welcome to Black Spot. Today, we're looking past the constant headlines that swirl around three of the world's most powerful leaders, Narendra Modi, Donald Trump, and Vladimir Putin. We're not just going to compare their policies, we're going deeper into the very mechanics of their power, the actual framework they use to lead. So, let's break it down.
So, what's the big question we're tackling here? It's this. How do their leadership styles really stack up against each other? We're going to dig into how they got to the top, how they use their executive authority, how they control the public story, and what they do when faced with dissent. And all of this is based on what academic and journalistic sources can tell us. Okay, before we dive in, a quick but really important heads up. This analysis is built strictly from the source materials we have. What that means is we've got a ton of detail on Modi and Trump, but honestly, a lot less information on Putin. So you're going to see that reflected in our comparison. All right, let's get into it. So here's our roadmap. We've broken this down into 5 parts. We'll kick things off by looking at how they even got into power. Then we'll see what they do with that power, how they shape the story that you and I hear, and how they handle any opposition. And then, at the end, we'll pull it all together to see the bigger picture.
First up, pathways to power. How on earth did these leaders climb to the top? Well, there's a key concept that really helps us understand this, and that word is populism.
Now, let's get clear on what populism actually means in this context, because it's not just about being popular. According to the political scientist Jan-Werner Müller, it's a specific worldview. It's one where your political opponents aren't just wrong, they're seen as illegitimate, as not even part of the real people. The populist leader then steps in and claims to be the only authentic voice for the people, fighting against some corrupt, out-of-touch elite.
So how does this actually play out? Well, in India, Narendra Modi aimed to power championing Hindutva, or Hindu nationalism, and he positioned himself as the guy who would fight corruption on behalf of the Hindu majority. Meanwhile, in the US, Donald Trump tapped into a really different but also very powerful anti-establishment feeling. Some scholars call his platform securitarian. He promised his base protection from all sorts of threats, both criminal and external. So you see, two very different contexts, but a surprisingly similar strategy. Define an us and then define a them. So, they've won the election, but what happens next? That brings us to our second section, wielding executive authority. How do these leaders actually use their power once they're sitting in the big chair?
This table gives us a really fascinating side-by-side look. In India, you see the Modi government making a huge constitutional change. They revoked Article 370, which completely stripped autonomy from Jammu and Kashmir. Over in the US, Trump used regulatory bodies like the FCC to lean on broadcasters and used executive orders to kill diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And for Putin, our sources point to his use of power in foreign policy, specifically making Russia's partnership with India even stronger. You can already see a pattern emerging, can't you? Modi uses these sweeping constitutional moves, Trump uses regulatory pressure, and Putin leverages foreign policy. And this quote from a former FCC chairman, Tom Wheeler, just hits the nail on the head when it comes to Trump. He says that, while these actions were often sold as being market-friendly, using a federal agency to pressure companies over what they say is really a form of heavy-handed regulation. In other words, it's using the levers of government to coerce, not to set free. And to really grasp the sheer scale of executive action in India, just look at what happened in Kashmir. This wasn't just about repealing one article in the Constitution. We're talking about completely redrawing the map of the state, imposing one of the world's longest internet shutdowns, and detaining local political leaders. It is a powerful, powerful example of using the full force of the state to assert central control. And that leads us right into our third section, controlling the narrative. Because look, power isn't just about what you do. It's about shaping how people feel and think about what you do. This quote from Tristan Harris just sets the stage perfectly. He's basically arguing that the whole business model of social media is a huge problem for democracy. Why? Because to win, politicians have to play the algorithm's game, and that algorithm rewards outrage and division more than anything else. The narrative is no longer just being shaped in newsrooms, it's being shaped by code.
And here's where we see that battleground get really specific. In India, a study of fake news on social media found that politics and religion are two of the biggest themes. And that's not an accident. Disinformation that targets these major societal fault lines is an incredibly powerful tool for polarization. And you know who benefits from that? Leaders who build their base on a really strong sense of religious and political identity.
And when you look even closer at the propaganda in India's political world, you see these classic textbook techniques being used. You've got card stacking, only showing the facts that support your side. You have stereotyping to create an enemy. You've got appeals to fear to make the leader look like the only one who could protect you. And then there's the black and white fallacy, which takes super complex issues and boils them down to a simple us versus them choice.
So the crucial takeaway here is how these methods are different. In India, the sources point to more direct control. You've got partisan media, threats of violence against journalists, and strict IT rules that have contributed to a press freedom ranking of 161st out of 180 countries. But in the US under Trump, the approach was different. It was more about using regulatory bodies as a threat, launching direct political attacks on news outlets, and of course, masterfully using social media to talk directly to his base, completely bypassing the traditional media gatekeepers.
Okay, let's move on to our fourth section, dissent and civil society. How do these administrations deal with people who disagree with them or who organize outside of the government's control? Let's just pause on this number for a second. 18 months. I mean, just think about that. A government-imposed internet shutdown for a year and a half. This isn't just an inconvenience. It is a tool designed to fundamentally silence expression, to cripple communication, and to shut down civil society in its tracks. And this isn't a one-off. A U.S. State Department report, which was cited by the Congressional Research Service, outlines a much broader pattern of concerns in India. It points to restrictions on media and internet freedom, threats against journalists, interference with peaceful assembly, and even the harassment of human rights organizations.
Now, over in the U.S., the approach to civil society looked different. The Trump administration took aim at diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI initiatives, both inside the government and beyond. The FCC chairman didn't just enforce an order, he went on the record, messaging his intent to use regulatory power to pressure private companies to end their own DEI programs, framing the whole concept as a fight against a scourge. And all of this brings us to our final section. Now that we've looked at all the individual pieces, power, authority, narrative, and dissent, what does the complete puzzle actually look like? It's time to synthesize. This table does a great job of summing it all up. For Modi, his power is rooted in a narrative of Hindu nationalism. It's exercised through huge constitutional changes and things like internet shutdowns, and it's enforced with partisan media and restrictions on civil society. For Trump, his power is rooted in an anti-establishment, securitarian narrative. It's exercised through regulatory pressure and executive orders and enforced by attacking media outlets and specific civil society movements like DEI.
And this quote just brilliantly frames the wider context. What it suggests is that these leadership styles don't just pop up out of nowhere. They find fertile ground in political systems where public trust in institutions and all those old norms of accountability have already started to rot away.
Which leaves us with a final and pretty critical question. Are we just seeing a shared global blueprint for a new kind of populist, authoritarian leadership? Or are these leaders, despite all their similarities, ultimately just products of the unique political and cultural histories of their own nations? The truth, as it often does, probably lies somewhere in the middle.
These leadership styles are complex systems, with mechanics that are often hidden just beneath the surface. And as always, we encourage you to question appearances. If you found this breakdown valuable, subscribe to Blackspot for more investigations into the forces that shape our world. Thanks for watching.